morning.
Happy new day. Here on the East Coast, this is CLB Live, and you are watching here. We are live here, rather, with Dr. Manny, St. Victor, and we are extremely excited today because we are speaking on a topic that is extremely timely. Focus. So before we dive into the conversation, I want to thank you for your patience. Thank you for hanging in there, both on listenvisionlive.com or WLVSradio.com, as well as Facebook. Thank you all for your patience. We have an awesome production team, so thanks to them for getting us live today so that we can have this conversation and engage with each other.
Yep.
If this is your first time joining the show, we are extremely honored that you've decided to tune in. We have over... I've lost count of the countries, but we have 150 countries that tune into the station every single week, with over 30 of those countries that tune into CLB Live. We have almost 1,000 viewers that are consistently watching the show, and that includes you. So we're very excited to have you as part of our Wonderland, because that's what this show is all about.
Intellectual Wonderland.
Intellectual Wonderland, where we explore topics that will help us to resist limiting beliefs, tap deeper into creative thought, and take action every single day to live life at its highest potential. So we're going to dive right into the conversation. You know I have to repeat the notable quotable, right? Always remember, your focus creates your reality. And that is by George Lucas. So let's dive into it, Dr. Manny, and talk about focus. First, let's talk about the definition of focus. I love to talk about the definition of words. You had mentioned it earlier.
Okay. The way I like to think about focus is bringing all your energy to one place.
Okay.
And even beyond that, to one time, really being here now. It's not just being there physically, but being there in your state of mind, so that the things that you're thinking about, even the memories you're pulling up, are the ones that serve you best in that moment.
Okay. So bringing everything into one place. I love that. I forgot to mention, guys, if you want to participate in the conversation, please join us on Facebook Live. Mm-hmm. We have conversation happening here. You are an instrumental part of this show. Show doesn't happen without the conversation for me. And also you can use the hashtag CLB Live chat on the social platforms. Yep. But yes, bringing everything into one place. Now, as human beings, our focus can be very scattered, right? Yep. Oh, look, squirrel. Oh, look, a bright, shiny new object, you know? So there are things that are constantly coming up in our lives. We have goals and aspirations, but there are things that are constantly throwing us off track, aka distractions.
Exactly.
Yeah, so let's talk about that first. That would be a good start for me.
Okay. One of the most important things to recognize is when you are going, but you're not focused. This is when you're dealing with either being in a reaction, you could overreact to something. You could be so busy focused on not reacting that you've kind of disconnected from the present. You're in your mad state, thinking about what you should be saying, but you're not, What other aspects? And then sometimes you just haven't gathered enough attention for long enough time for it to count as focus, because really focusing takes you... the way they like to think about focus is that for the first few minutes, you're still, I like to think of it as descending into the focus, Yeah.
Okay.
I imagine focus, because of my visual system, I imagine focus as this this private space, just a quieter, more meaningful, goal-directed space. Mm-hmm. And you don't just magically get there. Even with practice, it takes you a while to let go of other thoughts running in your mind, other stories, other emotions.
To get to that space.
Yeah, I like to imagine, back in the day where they had you smell coffee beans in between perfumes.
Sniffing, perfume, yeah.
When I descend into a focused state, what I like to do is let everything else go and make sure that I'm thinking about one intention. Mm-hmm. When you have that intention clearly stated, often most powerfully in action words, like if something that you're doing right now. Mm-hmm. So I like to use the baking a cake example because it's simple. If I know that overall my big story is that I'm baking a cake, and I know that my current step is whipping up the eggs to the right texture. And I'm
Okay.
just pulling this out of nowhere because I don't know how to make a cake. Hey, Dr. Vanessa.
Not even the box mix cake?
Yo, I was going to say, so if you should be opening the box and pouring whatever they've put together in there, whatever step you're supposed to be on, you want your attention to be in that step. And the reason is that by bringing your attention to that step, you're pulling up all the past memories of that step. You're performing the step, you're adjusting your memories and your actions to the feedback.
Yeah.
So next time you do that step, you get better at it, you get more energy efficient, and you get more clear mentally in that step. That's a very important part because most of your energy in distraction goes to you being elsewhere and you're doing something and it's not even relevant anymore. Either the way you're doing it is not mapping to the environment, or you're just doing it and you're beating yourself up emotionally in the process, and so you're not in flow. You're no longer the very reason that you started doing the thing starts to fade, and you get a bit depersonalized and disconnected. Disengaged is the word usually.
Yeah. What's coming to mind now, staying in the zone, I love that you described it as a magic space, your focus space.
Yeah.
It is, I call it my CLB free zone. It's the zone where it's almost tunnel vision. I'm just focused on this one thing. I'm going to knock it out and get it done. Going back to distraction, for me, as a recovering procrastinator turned proactive lifestyler, you caught me gazing just then because I'm processing.
Yeah.
I caught myself. For me, procrastination really is rooted in fear. And fear, for me, is the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? The biggest distractor of distraction.
It is.
Yeah. I had a quote by Stephen Pressfield. He's the author of Do the Work. Fantastic book for getting stuff done. He's also more popularly known for The War of Art. In that book, he says resistance will tell you anything to keep you from doing your work.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. But you have to have the clarity of the initial focus to define what it is you're doing so that you can realize the resistance. Because otherwise, the resistance can masquerade as focused work.
Yes, it can. And you will start to make excuses for why you're doing this and how it contributes to the bigger cause. But that was my point, I slipped. That was my point, is having that clarity prior to your going into action mode is critical. Because if the clarity isn't there, then anything is going to move you from off of that track, right?
Yeah. So what's important is that often focus gets discussed as if it's one thing, but focus is part of an actual framework. Before you can focus on something in a guilt-free, distraction-free, prepared way, it's very helpful to have taken the time, done the work, to create a prioritized list. So if you're working off your prioritized list and you're working on what you've decided intentionally is the most important thing, you're in that intention. So when something else pops up as a distraction, it just, because it's urgent, it doesn't knock the most important, most goal contributing thing you've chosen to do out of line. And you can, because you have your prioritized list, you can put it on the list. And based off that, you can do some quick math and see where it goes on the list based on how badly you want the thing that you're going after, how much of a danger it is to the thing that you're going after, how much of a danger it might be to other high priority things. So having done the work to think through a framework of what are your most important things allows you, when you're working on the most important thing, to focus, knowing that when you're done, you'll be able to move on to the next important thing as well. You stay connected to the purpose. Sure.
Love that. If you spoke to me about 4 or 5 years ago in this manner, I would be cringing. When you talk about lists, I've really come to appreciate the power of list and with your intention and tying that in with intention, which leads me to go into some of the things that I needed to practice and that I believe will be beneficial for anyone who struggles in this area of getting into that zone of area of focus, even to get to a point where the word list is palatable to me. I'm just being completely transparent. I used to spit it out, reject it immediately when I heard list.
Well, what's important with the framework is when you've learned a framework for thinking, you embed your emotions in it. You always hear people say, trust the process. If you don't trust the process, then you can't be in the moment because each individual event or each individual action becomes a meaningless, disjointed, just something you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Even, we'll go back to the cake baking example. If you're baking a cake and it's for someone's birthday party that you like, you're baking that cake with a whole different passion.
A whole different feeling.
Than if you're baking a cake that you have to do to bring into work for a bake sale that you didn't even feel like being there that day.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't even like the cause it's going towards. So
yeah. So the joy factor isn't there.
Yeah. So this is where focus becomes extra important because a lot of times focus, and we mentioned distraction initially. A lot of times focus during what they call the elaboration period. This is the time during which you think through your intention to the point where you feel it and you enjoy it, you embed yourself in it. It's having thought through that enough where you can imagine yourself doing it that's the branch they call the intention branch, as opposed to something pops up unexpected and imposes random expectations that, it activates expectations that you have. Mm-hmm. The reason it's important is when you're dealing in an intention, you feel in control, you feel less stressed, you feel on your way to something, and when it's done, you feel good. When you deal with an expectation, usually that means that somewhere there's a story you have that you don't have any control over that situation. So your next action is usually a negative emotion. And even when it's not a negative emotion, like, oh, this thing is in my way, I can't continue. So you escalate, you get angry, you get sad, you get disappointed, you get jealous, whatever other emotions that let you know that there's something you're feeling that's out of your reach, and therefore you've resigned to the emotion. On the other side of it, even if it's something good that meets the expectations, that is a positive expectation come through, if it's written as an expectation instead of an intention, in your mind, you're still giving the environment control for doling out the goodies for you.
Sure.
You're not feeling any more in control. And the bad part of that is that's how you get, this is your basic Pavlov conditioning. This is how we develop superstitions. This is how we develop limiting beliefs of scarcity. If you believe that you have to focus on waiting for a signal to come up before you can get your goodies, then you get really good at noticing that signal. You get really good at connecting your emotions to that expectation as a sign that things are going your way. If you become intentional and you step through, you get clear on what you want and you focus on that, and then you keep your focus in that space. And this is why it takes time. You dig into it enough that you can imagine the steps. Then you become the person that you notice opportunities in the environment to accomplish your goal that other people walk right past because they're looking for cake, and you're collecting eggs, you're collecting flour, you're collecting that box mix, you're collecting the stir, you're getting your ways and means together because you've deconstructed the goal and you're focusing on each of those. It's easy to see it as just a list if you haven't thought through it and made the emotional connection to it.
That's the key right there.
Yeah.
Is tying the emotion. I call it your why. What is the reason for going through this process of whatever it is? So like you said, the intention behind it is what drives us. What I'd like to do, if we may, is acknowledge our Facebook viewers. Welcome our WLBS viewers, of course. And we have our Facebook Live viewers. I saw over here on this side, we had Gemma from Trinidad, April Roga, Barb Tomlin, Wenda Mornix. Welcome. We had Maria Noel. And who do we have on this side?
Dr. Vanessa was here, J. Allen Hale, David Gray, and my buddy from undergrad, Jeff Livingston.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Welcome to you all. You are also a part of this conversation. Barb, love your analogy, by the way. She said great analogy. Dr.
You like cake?
Who doesn't, right?
Who doesn't like cake?
Who doesn't like cake? Yeah. What I'd like to
Thank you.
invite everyone to do is share your thoughts, please, on focus. Share your practices. that you utilize to stay in the zone or stay focused. And what I'd like to touch on now is we're speaking a lot about being in the zone. I'd like to go now into how to get to the zone, because as we said at the top of the hour when we were on Facebook Live, a lot of people speak about focus and staying focused, and you gotta be focused and da 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 da, but they don't really talk about too much how to get there. And that was one of the stumbling blocks for me. So for me, I have 3 things that I practice to stay in the zone, or that I utilize to stay in the zone. You want me to share them?
Well, I wanted to look at how you know you're not in the zone to begin with.
We did touch on that before we went live, so yes, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So a lot of times you'll see someone who is grinding out, but they're going nowhere really fast in the wrong direction. And they think they're focused. They're obsessed and they're doing the same thing over and over again, waiting for magic to happen. It's important to recognize when you're not in your zone of focus. The way you can do that, one of the quick techniques that I like to use is noticing when you're caught up in what's called the drama triangle. If you're sitting there and the discussion is more about resolving emotions, more about defining yourself, more about protecting your status in the group, more about being seen, more about how something looks than how effective it is, then you're not focused. So there's 3 positions in the drama triangle, and you guys can look it up for a deeper dive. There's the hero position, there's the victim position, and then there's the villain position, which is a bit of a persecutor position. You can tell when you're in one of these positions when in the middle of a project or whatever, as a hero, if you find that your mind is more on how good you look saving the team, how many compliments you're getting, anything that is distracting you from the end outcome, then you're in the hero state. You're not being productive. Now, one of the bad things about a hero position is if you're so busy helping someone else on the team who's in what's called the victim position, then you're not being productive. That's 2 people on the team on the sidelines. We're not focused. In the victim position, that's when a lot of times you might have someone who, when stress kicks in, they get sick. When stress kicks in, they get helpless. When stress kicks in, instead of contributing, this is the person who brings the cups and napkins all the time to the cookout. Okay? That's the best metaphor, because they show up and they brought something, but you're like, I feel as if we all did a little bit more work than you did. So the downside of that person is they're focused on, again, how they look, how they feel. They're caught up in that victimhood instead of they're planning to get back to work on the project right after they get over their feelings. Now, that's position 2. Position 3 of not being focused is the villain. Sometimes they call it the persecutor. That's a person who is so angry or so frustrated by someone playing the victim position that they get more caught up in blaming, shaming, and punishing and forget to focus on the end outcome. The key here is the measurement is how much are you in the vision. Okay? Now, another thing that happens, loss of focus, is when the hero suddenly comes to rescue the victim from the villain. Or, that's still
that
energy.
That is a drama triangle.
And you see how this is, it feels, the stories become so alive, so you're so in it, and it's so visceral and passionate that you become focused on the wrong thing. That's sort of the dark side of focus. You become obsessive about this thing, and you're going to work, and instead of thinking about what you want to get done at work, you're thinking about how angry you are at the person in the seat next to you. You might be thinking about sabotaging them. You might be thinking about showing them up at the next meeting. You might be thinking about getting closer to the boss than them. These are all things that may be strategically useful in the right toxic environment, but they're not focused.
Yeah.
So those are the ways to notice when you're off focus.
And is this focus in the context of working as a team?
You're always working as a team if you're going to get a goal done. We're social collaborative creatures. If you think you're doing it by yourself, then you're not doing it.
Well, that was the point I was bringing across. There are a lot of lone rangers out there. Well, I just chuckle because I have a friend that says even the Lone Ranger had Tonto. But, there are a lot of people who are trying to fly solo, either out of shame or whatever reason they don't think, or they're being protective of their ideas, and that is also a way to stay out of the zone. One of the things or techniques that I practice to stay in my zone is to surround myself with the right people. So that's why I asked about the team context.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people still are developing the skills of how to work together with our visions and our goals, right?
Yep.
We touched on this a few weeks ago.
We did on the core values conversation.
Yeah.
The most common saying, the one that I like the most, is that you become the 5 people you spend the most time with. And the reason is that if you're spending all your time in some drama triangles, then it becomes a habit. It becomes what happens at work. You walk in and you're arguing. You walk in, you're defending yourself. You walk in, you're dodging toxic people. Then it's easy to fall into the trap of, these are all things I can't control. But when you return your focus to your desired outcome, you start redefining every aspect of what you're doing. Is it time to switch jobs? Is it time to switch careers? Is it time to change the people you hang out with on the weekends? Is it time to change your relationship? Is it time to change the way you interact with or listen to someone? Until you're connected to the group that's headed your way, you're not benefiting from a whole culture of information of millennia of people who've made a ton of mistakes that you're making right now in some back alley, instead of tapping into what has made humans successful, the collective unconscious.
Yeah, I love how all our conversations are tying together, because everything's kind of rushing back to me from conversation we had in the past. And it's so very critical to work on ourselves in a manner that will attract those right people in a synchronous way.
Yeah. A serendipitous event.
So that we have the right people that are there to help move us forward and not distract us either in those 3 roles you were speaking of, and pull us away from our goal, which is typically what happens. I also love the quote about you're the sum total of the 5 people you surround yourself with. That is very true, because that stinking thinking does transfer. I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about how we get into that zone. Barb shared one of her techniques for staying focused, which is creating art. I believe creativity, I know that creativity is definitely a way to clear the clutter of our minds, because that for me is the first step that I take when I feel like I'm out of the zone. Is I have to clear the clutter, because our minds can become cluttered with information if we are not aware of it. And so doing something to reset our mindsets is critical for getting into the zone. I'm not talking about staying in the zone. I'm talking about just getting there, because that was something I really had to learn as a procrastinator, is how do I even get there?
Yeah.
So practicing, I'm a creative by nature. You know this, right? I love to create art. Graphic design is my thing. And so just sitting at my computer and creating something along with my music, it puts me in a frame of mind where I'm opening myself up to receive that flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the most important part there is the creativity activates your imagination. It allows you to create a story that's not the story that you've lived in the past.
Amen.
It allows you to shift your focus from a story where you don't have control that is happening to you anyway, which is what's associated often with that anxiety, that worry. As long as you're focused on a version of the story where the things that you want are not happening, it's going to be a drain on you. You're going to be in that resistance state where you're kind of pulling back from the future happening in its natural cadence.
Yeah, it keeps us present. You know, creativity, a creative act is something that you must focus on in the present moment. And so Barb, thank you for sharing that, because we are so on the same page, girl. High five. So that's my go-to for getting into the zone. There are other things as well. You know, meditation without question is a way to clear the clutter and be present. Going for a walk with nature and just letting go. You touched on letting go earlier.
Yeah.
Letting go of the shite. #SHYT. Just letting go of stuff and walking with nature and just taking in the fact that we're part of something bigger that works for me.
Yep.
It really empowers me.
Yeah. Music
Come on
Most
now.
definitely, music will get you in your zone.
You heard me say music earlier, right?
Well, you mentioned it, but I want to underline it.
To reiterate that,
Yeah.
music is a great way to get in the zone. You know, whether it's, and which leads me to working out. Diet and exercise.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that is the first step. And I'm not a nutritionist, but I've been practicing healthy eating for a long time, thanks to my mama. And so what we're taking into our bodies every single day is critical to our mental clarity and our focus. If are we eating the right things? Are we making the right choices? Are we moving every day? Are we stretching? Are we connecting with, because we connect with the harmony of the universe, I believe, when we're exercising.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's the most important part of all that is making a choice. Okay? There's this thing called choice-induced preference, where the second you choose something, it doesn't matter whether it's identical to everything else on the table. The second you put the label of mine on it, your brain subconsciously shoots it up in value. And now you're going to protect it, you're going to look after it, and you're going to appreciate that you had it. Now, it's more important, the most important part is sometimes something will come up that you don't necessarily feel like doing, but if you have the presence of mind to focus your energy right then and there on redefining it, and they call it reframing it, that's the most powerful thing, because if you take a split second to realize why you're going to do what you essentially, quote, initially thought you had to do, the split second to say to yourself, you know, by doing this, later on I will have the free time to do whatever else. That way, suddenly, your whole mind frame, it reframes it as a choice. You do it less resentfully. You do it more in a more present state of mind. And it's a large part of how a lot of times Pavlovian conditioning works. Because what you're doing when you say to yourself, I'm doing this so that I can do my higher cause, is you're linking those two ideas in your mind and creating that connection that allows you to condition yourself to enjoying sometimes the drudge work that you have to do to get where you want to.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I love that you shared that because it gives you a kind of, it dangles that reward in front of you, like this is why I'm doing this, which I love. That's how most people work out. I don't know, when I'm working out, I'm thinking, okay, if I do these squats every single day, yes, it hurts like heck, but you know, I'll have a tight tushy. Right? So the reason for doing it is important. Barb said that she sings while creating art, which is, that's the zone to me.
That's a beautiful combo.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I'm not the best singer, but I do sing too.
Yeah, a lot of times.
I do karaoke.
And you're a synesthete. Like a lot of artists are synesthetes. That means that color, when they hear sounds, it elicits colors.
See it in color, for sure.
And then I know a couple of guys who are math synesthetes. When they see the numbers, they actually think of the numbers.
Art?
They see the numbers with personalities.
That's beautiful. Yeah. That's you, actually.
I see numbers with personality.
You see numbers as art.
Numbers are beautiful, but most people think I'm just geeking when I say that, and I am.
It's true, though. It's true. Science and art are very much intertwined. I believe that they go hand in hand. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, because once you hit the end of what you know, you have to jump into what you can imagine. And people who are uncomfortable in that imaginary space aren't going to make any discoveries. They're not going to be able to focus in on what they have an intuition telling them is the next hypothesis to test. So this is hypothesis testing in the science. But in art, hypothesis testing is, will my audience be nurtured by it? Even on a subconscious, visceral level. A large part of the time, what I found when I'm writing is that beyond just the words, there's the power in the word order. There's the power in what the words evoke. There's a power in the connotation of the words. There's another layer of power in the thematics. Your conscious mind is not processing all that. Your subconscious mind gets immersed in the experience, and you're like, I enjoyed reading that. Was it because it rhymed? Was it because of word choice? Was it because of the sentence that came before and after it? Was it because of the picture they used? Doesn't really matter. It's a matter of creating something that has the information the person needs, the science, helps them do whatever they're trying to do better, and at the same time brings their focus in through an attraction factor, a sense of belonging, a sense of optimism at the end of the experience with your stuff.
Amen to that. So we're winding down on time. So I definitely want to touch on this. The acronym for focus that many people go by is follow one course until successful. Okay, so follow one course until successful. Looks like we have some grace time. So what we're going to do, if we can, is roll our Divine Connection Spotlight. Then we'll talk about the acronym. Can we do that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
So you have 30 more minutes. Because it's only 30 minutes like on the recording. So
Okay.
I'll give you a full hour.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know what
Audio. Oh, I gotta press the
The
headphone.
headphones. Yo, camera. Count 'em in. 5,
4, 3, 2.
Okay, welcome back.
Welcome back.
You are watching CLB Live with Dr. Manny St. Victor. We are here broadcasting live from Listen Vision Studios in Washington, D.C. We're having a phenomenal conversation
About focus.
about focus.
The power of focus.
Yes. And clarity, mental clarity is so important. Mindset matters with everything. We've already established this conversation. And this to me is something that a lot of us, if not all of us, struggle with from time to time, is staying in the zone, staying focused and on the path to our intended destination, whatever that is, right? Our goals are.
Yeah. So you're gonna hit us up with the acronyms.
I'm about to go into the acronym.
Awesome
So
sauce.
focus.
Yep.
A lot of people use this acronym. It says follow one course until successful. Love that. That's something that was chanted a lot in my former business. However, again, speaking as a recovering procrastinator turned proactive lifestyler, I like to preface it with procrastinator just to put it in context for people. Follow one course until successful put a lot of pressure on me, to be honest.
It feels a little rigid.
It's rigid. I'm not a rigid person. I like fluidity.
Yeah.
So can we talk about this acronym, and is it a misnomer for focus?
It's follow one course until successful if you've got your prioritized list. With the problem I have a lot of times with some of the ideas and acronyms floating around the internet is they don't have the context to be useful to a lot of folks who are coming across that idea and jumping in.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
We discussed earlier the importance of making a list, prioritizing that list, and looking at connecting that list to intentions. Basically, we usually think of it as putting it on my calendar, but you can also connect your list elements to resources, and they call that implementation intentions. So when I'm at the store, I will purchase these things. So in your brain, you focus on when I'm at the store, and once you get to the store, you don't worry about everything else under the sun. You get really focused on the store things you wanted to do.
Those things, right.
Yeah.
Which most time doesn't happen. I'm just saying. Go ahead.
But so until you condition yourself to each of these focus points, they're not going to be useful. Okay? But when people are attached, in order to be conditioned to a particular focus point, to a particular point in the pathway, in the whole framework, you have to be getting benefits from it. And if you're following one course until it's successful and it's the wrong course, and you can feel it in your bones that it's the wrong course, and you don't have the other aspects of the framework, reframing, changing perspective, reconsidering the context of what you're doing until you have connected it to your why.
Yeah.
Sometimes goal abandonment, because the person that you've become along the way through the changes in your goal made it that goal is not as valuable as something else that comes up. You know,
Yeah.
if you're a child playing on the playground, eventually at some point the playground gets less interesting. You know, and you don't want to guilt yourself into not finishing a couple more walks across the jungle gym. You know.
Agreed. Because then it makes it really drudgery.
Yeah.
I've been there. So coming from, this is where we go into the art and science. That's what you're looking at right here, right? I'm coming from a divine perspective now. There's a certain level, we need to be intentional. That's a whole nother conversation, but it has to do with getting in the zone and staying focused. However, we need to be detached from that outcome.
Yep.
We need to be detached from how we're getting to that goal. So while we're in the zone, like you said, there's so many other facets to focus. So follow one course until successful. For me, it is a misnomer. I do not like it at all. Just stating it for the record, because if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. We can plan stuff out to the nitty gritty. We can create our list, and we could probably execute it well, staying focused. However, being so rigid, it blocks off that creative flow. It blocks off the inspiration. It blocks the ideas, the opportunities, the people,
The
the
serendipity.
synchronous events that can come our way, or do come our way actually. All the time things are happening for us. And if we are so rigid and so tunnel vision, and I'm staying focused, I'm focused on one course, then we will miss that bigger picture.
You'll miss the synchronicity.
We'll miss the sprinkles. You better stop.
Okay, I gotta bring them back in. Anyone who watched last week's show, we have this ongoing discussion, because as long as I've met her, she does not like the word serendipity because it has a luck connotation. We talked about that more on last episode, so check that out.
Check out last week's episode.
But in order to get the synchronicity, you have to go through serendipity. She's saying, no, I don't like serendipity. So how you gonna get the... Anyway.
We're not going there today.
So the FOCUS acronym doesn't make room for serendipity, and she doesn't want to say that yet. Because she doesn't like the words.
For synchronicity. Let's just get those two words off the table right now.
There it is.
It doesn't allow for us to see the opportunities that come our way for our higher good.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we may have created a list, we may have followed it to the T, but did that turn out? Did that goal, did that intention turn out the way that it could have had we been open and fluid with our process? So detachment is very important with focus. It's a balance of being focused and being detached. So there's another acronym for focus that I would now like to share. That's the one that I personally use because I think it's brilliant, and it speaks to this fluid process of staying focused. And it says, finding original, creative, unique solutions. I love that.
Yeah.
So that replaces the other one for me.
Yeah. And do you want to elaborate on it? Because I will.
Finding original. What I just shared was my elaboration.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Yeah. Focus is an active process. You're not just like, okay, I'm focused, and you're in there. Focus means a connection to the feedback and a clarity about where you're trying to get, so that the more focused you get, the more subtle feedback you're attending to, and the faster you're learning. This is where you make your amazing time gains, because not only are you not having emotional distractors yank you out of your flow, but when distractors come up, because you remember your reason and where you're trying to get, right then and there, and that's running in the background, right then and there, you can trust yourself to make micro adjustments in how you interact with either the feedback, whether it's from someone, changes to your environment, and most importantly, because in the process of pursuing your goal, you're going to change as a person, nuances in your preferences, adjustments in your values, value clarification. I'll tell you, when I got out of my residency, my focus was getting paid, because I joined the startup world and we're about making it rain.
Yeah.
But I got to the point where I realized that the more revenue I was making, the more disconnected I was becoming from certain elements because, I was watching the numbers and it was like, okay, it's math. If we do this, we can generate more revenue. If I put in more hours, we can put more in the bank or whatever. But then I was forgetting, why am I doing it? What am I going to do with that money that in the long term?
Bigger purpose, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when you change, as you focus for longer periods of time, your self-esteem develops, your courage develops, your passion for the thing you're focused on develops because of sunk cost. You do this weird thing where after you've been focusing on something, you get better at it, you're more efficient at it, and because your brain is starting to get where it's easier to think about it, you like it more, and you start to identify with it. It becomes who you are. Mm-hmm. But if, as you're becoming who you are, you realize that the goal you defined originally is wrong, needs qualification, needs wholesale revamping, then you need to focus on getting up out of there and making your path the one that's more aligned with your values and your desired outcome, your new desired outcome.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's a great analogy. Thank you for sharing your personal experience on that.
Man.
But it's a great analogy for being fluid with our process. The goal should never change. It's the how we get there that's fluid. So if your intention is X, it's always going to be X. It's just how do we get there? What does the X really look like? Yeah. Reminds me of Carmen Rojas. Knowing where to put your X.
Yeah.
Remember that show?
Yeah.
Hey, Carmen, if you're watching. So, folks, we're talking about #focus, the power of clarity, living life with focused intention. Focus is something that, as human beings, we all have to stay conscious of because there's so many things happening around us. It is so very easy to avert our attention on our intentions. Ooh, I like that. Avert our attention on our intentions.
That could be a song title.
I'm feeling that.
That's a geek song title for sure. I geek about it.
I'm liking that. Yeah, so we're talking about focus today. And there was a couple of things that I also wanted to touch on. There's a quote about a focused beam of light. The sun's rays, it says a focused beam of light is what burns through things.
Yeah, like the sun coming down won't do much. It might warm you.
Scattered rays will illuminate, but a focused beam of light will cut through. Yeah. There you go. That's another focus quote. I just thought of it, so I had to bring it up. So we're talking about focus, and we want to acknowledge our Facebook Live fam over here on CLB Live TV, as well as over on Dr. Manny's Pro.
So Dr. Jamila, Dr. Nicole, and Dr. Michelle came through. Got the Dr. fam representing.
Got the Dr. fam, docpreneurs. Hey.
Yep, representing.
Yep, and we have several.
And George Station, who's an
side.
educator. George is a high-tech educator. He knows the science of education. That dude will be connected in it.
Interesting. I like that. Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper into focus. We still have a few minutes if you all are able to hang with us. If you aren't aware, we started a little after the top of the hour. We had a few technical difficulties, and thank you if you have been hanging in here with us. We really appreciate it. So we're just going to go probably 10 minutes more so we can fill out this conversation about focus. So there was something I wanted to share, and of course it slipped me because something distracted me. See how easy it is to lose focus? Especially on live TV.
Yeah, but one of the neat things, and we discussed earlier, is that when you have a structure, the more clearly you've defined the structure, like the purpose, the more easily your brain will return to a space where even if you're not talking about the exact same thing, at the end of the conversation, you've had an increase in the useful information around the idea. And that's a lot of how we flow on here, where we make sure we're covering certain things so that after this conversation, you're more prepared in your day-to-day to think about the idea differently. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let me run through my mind the things that I know I wanted to cover, and you let me know if we forgot one.
Okay.
Okay, we wanted to discuss the core definition of focus. So we got that.
We got that.
We talked about recognizing when you're not being focused. That was talking about the victim triangle. I discussed how focusing on the wrong things can feel good sometimes. Did we talk about good versus bad focus. I think we touched on it.
We touched on it, but we
Okay.
didn't go into it. We have about 10 minutes, so we're good.
Okay.
Let's talk
Okay.
about it.
In-
Good focus versus bad.
Yeah. You can be focused on things that are triggered by the outside world, or you can be focused on things that are triggered by your inside world. Now, in your outside world, well, in both cases, you can be triggered by threat or temptation. A threat can scare you into feeling like that's the most urgent, most important thing to attend to right then and there, and then you focus on it, and it might suck you in. It might take time from other things that are part of your self-definition. You know, you might be in a defense state, you might be in an angry state, you might be in fight or flight. And we talked about the victim triangle earlier, that covers that. But it's important to know that temptations are just as distracting. Often, the universe sends resources to us to do something bigger. But, you know, to use my cake metaphor earlier, if when you got the eggs, you got enough eggs to make cake, but you woke up in the morning before making the cake and you craved omelets, and you made an omelet, then you get to the cake and you're not. You had a path laid out that you were preparing for, and you messed up some of the preparation. So that's those two aspects. On the inside, the imagination aspects, if you're imagining threats by wrapping stories around dangerous things you interpret as dangerous, if you're imagining temptations, if you're imagining, and they call this magical beliefs. When we're really stressed, we do magical beliefs, where we imagine things like, if I'm polite enough, I'm going to get this promotion. If enough people like me, I'll get a raise. And that's not what it's about. It's about finding out what the specific results are that the person who's making the decision wants. That's a large part of the focus. So those are the two branches to distraction, non-productive things that can take your focus in. I can scare you, and even beyond that, I can scare you, and then I can give you a little bit of relief, and you'll be so happy that I didn't all the way kill you that you're satisfied with a little bit of relief, and that's how you end up compromising your values. You're like, oh, so glad everything's okay. It's not about everything being okay. Get off your butt. Get back to working on the thing that you say you believe in so passionately.
If I may,
Go for
I do believe it has a lot to do with knowing how we tick. And the outside influences, that's the default. The default is, you know, adopting our beliefs based on, or our actions on what other people are saying, thinking, or what we're assuming they're thinking and saying about us.
Yep.
And so knowing ourselves is very important. I'm speaking from experience on this one. Knowing ourselves, knowing how we tick is critical to focus and mental clarity, because once we go into that zone where we're thinking about other people and what they think and what they want, and it splits our focus into so many different facets that we end up not accomplishing anything at all, and then we feel worse about ourselves.
Yep. Anytime you off focus, you take a little bit of a chink in your self-esteem. You know, you're chopping away at that.
Yeah, your energetic level just goes down to a very low. Yep. You've been there. So knowing how we tick was another thing I wanted to share, is give yourself permission to go through that process of finding out how you focus. We're giving examples, but that doesn't mean that's the way you're going to focus. It's knowing you have to go within. Clear your mind. That's the first step. I think I'm sharing my closing thoughts. Clear your mind of the clutter. Eat the right things. Meditate. Music. Create. Those are the things that will get your mind to a reset point. Once you're there, then explore the things that make you stay focused. Is it something that you enjoy? Because a lot of us will want to focus on things that other people say we should focus on. No, focus on what your desires, the desires of your heart. That's what's going to move you to action. That's what I had to teach myself. So I'm sharing that with love. And so knowing how you tick is my closing thought and call to action.
Okay. And my closing thought and call to action is piggybacking on that, the way you get some clarity on what your brain does at baseline is spending 10 minutes a day on breathing exercise. And all my clients know the first week of coaching, we're going to have you breathing. Okay, and you've tried it.
I'm doing it. I haven't tried it. I'm practicing it.
Yay! See, it
I
works.
love it. I love it.
So
Thank you.
when you're doing those 10 minutes, first of all, you're setting a clear intention. For the next 10 minutes, I'm going to sit here and focus on my breathing. Simple task. During those 10 minutes, you notice every time your brain wanders off the breathing, and you say to yourself, okay, thank you. You know, have the gratitude for the ideas, because if your brain didn't do ideas, you'd die. So you say thank you, and you say, okay, I'm going to return to the breath now. And every time you return to the breath, think of it as doing 1 rep in the gym. So over those 10 minutes, you get better and better at creating a period of time during which you're focused. You also get better at recognizing the negative voices and thoughts that pop up that sometimes distract you during the day, but during the day you're so busy you think it's something else. So 10 minutes of breathing every day as a starting point during which you're listening to your thoughts is a way of getting a baseline so that when it's time to focus in real time, you've got that relationship history with you to compare.
Amen, brother. Great conversation. The conversation never ends. I always say that at the end of the shows. The live portion is ending, but that doesn't mean we stop having this conversation. So I'm going to invite each and every one of you, both on Listen Vision as well as on Facebook Live, to join us over on clblive.tv. There is an event page for this specific conversation that we will continue to share information, and we're going to invite you to also participate by sharing your thoughts, your ahas, your teaching moments, so that we can all learn together, grow together, and rise together. That's what this is all about. Next week, we are, well, first I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your energy has been amazing, and your patience. Technology is wonderful, but we are at its mercy sometimes. So thank you for that. So next week, Dr. Manny and I have allowed ourselves, I think, enough time to kind of brainstorm and brain dump on, all the things that we talk about in a private manner. CLB Live is an unscripted show, so we've actually taken our private conversations live over the last, 3 months? Yep. So next week, we're going to resume with some of our wonderful divine connections. We'll have Andy Bryan from over in the UK, who talks about the soul pathway and hero's journey, and we're really looking forward to having him on the show. So we're going to have him join us next week, followed by some other guests. So please come back so that we can engage in conversation next week. Anything else you'd like to share before we close?
Focus.
Focus. Hashtag focus. I'll close with this quote that I shared with Dr. Manny this morning. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. That's Socrates.
Yeah.
Mwah. Love and light.
Week, y'all.
Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend and a great week. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Ciao, ciao.